Welcome to the SpiritRxPodcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. In this place, two healers come together, each walking a different path, yet bound by a common purpose. Dr. Luke, a quantum chiropractor, and Dr. Hummel, a naturopathic doctor. These two practitioners have dedicated themselves to a vital quest to unite the timeless remedies passed down through the ages with the powerful discoveries of modern medical science. For they understand what many have forgotten, that true healing honors both tradition and innovation. Should you wish to learn more of their stories, their practices, or how to walk this path with them, you will find that knowledge in the link below. And now, let the healing wisdom begin.
Welcome to our next incredible episode of Spirit RX Podcast. Today we have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Pamela Plank, a naturopathic doctor. She is an expert in many, many things, but we're going to hear more from her and learn all about some really cool therapies that she offers. We're going to focus more on one.
So introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, what you're about.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with both of you. I just hold you both in the highest of esteem, so thank you very much. My name is, as you said, Dr. Pamela Plank. I'm a naturopath and acupuncturist, and I'm here in Ashland, Oregon. We've been here since 2019. I have been in practice since the early 2000s. So I've been doing this for a hot minute. I think we're going to talk today about low-dose immunotherapy, which I'm really excited about. It's been a newer addition for me in my practice the past couple of years, and I have just been so pleased with how it's been changing things for my patients. And I've been able to address things that have remained kind of sticky wickets that now just seem to unravel with ease, which makes me really happy.
Awesome. So let's get into that a little bit. You know, most patients, they probably have heard the word immunity when they come into a naturopathic office, but maybe you've never heard of low-dose immunotherapy. So how would you explain LDI to a curious, skeptical person walking in off the street?
You know who I always think of like as the ultimate skeptic is my dad. So whenever I can explain things well and he gets it, then I'm like, all right, we got it. So, when we talk about the immune system, we oftentimes are focusing on what is it fighting? We think about the bad guys and how is it going to take it out? And I oftentimes make the analogy for folks that our immune system is our armed forces and like all of the armed forces. And here I'm not as well versed, so if I say anything incorrectly, but it's like our Army and the Navy and the SEALs and the police force, like all of it constitutes our immune system. And it is that complex with different parts interacting with each other. But one of the things that we oftentimes forget to talk about is the first thing your army needs to know is what not to fight, right? It's called tolerance. So we're not supposed to fire on our own citizens. We're not supposed to attack our allies or people who are friendly to us. And that's really the heart of what low-dose immunotherapy is about, is that our immune system has gotten confused and is having either a larger response to a small problem. We know that really commonly with when we talk about allergies, where you're having something small and innocuous like a little pollen coming in. The pollen itself really isn't a problem, but the immune system mounts this huge response, and that's where you get all the weepy eyes and snuffly nose and that kind of thing. That the problem wasn't really the pollen, it was the immune system's response to it. So what we're trying to do with low-dose immunotherapy is actually remind the immune system, hey, this is a good guy. You don't have to fight this, which is really cool, especially with things like autoimmune, which is where the immune system has even started to literally attack our own tissue. To be able to remind the immune system to not do that is a pretty profound thing. And we don't have other answers that are as specific as a low-dose immunotherapy.
Thanks for that response. I like it because you're really saying our job isn't to try to control the environment, it's to control us and how we respond to the environment. And if we put our focus there, that's much more efficient and effective. Let's dive back a little bit more into some of the historical roots.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
so LDI, my understanding is it traces its roots back to Dr. Leonard McEwen into the 1960s and
Hmm.
evolved even further. Dr. Ty Vincent. Can you walk us through some of that, the historical roots of this? Because some people might think this is something really new,
Yeah.
but yet it's in essence been around a long time.
Mhm.
It has been around a long time, which is always nice. I always feel like it's always nice to understand where you are by looking at where you came from. And you're exactly right. Dr. McEwen started developing this in the 1950s, 1960s in the UK. And there's even some research on there from way back in the day. And then it was called enzyme potentiated desensitization, or EPD. And at that time, all of the antigens, which I'll just really quickly, the word antigen is pretty cool. It's anti for antibody, generating. So an antigen is anything that the immune system is developing antibodies to. So they were showing the bodies these antigens, and at that time, it was done with injections and it was done with this enzyme as well, beta glucuronidase. At that time, what they really thought was a key to recreating this tolerance in the immune system. And then Dr. Schrader brought it to the United States, and there were some legalities there where the medicine stayed mostly the same, and then the name shifted to LDA, which was low dose allergen therapy. And then there was a few pharmacies at that time that were making, there's just a limited amount of antigens that they had. They had a food mix, they had an allergy mix, they had an environmental mix, and then they only had a very few amount of potencies, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit. And again, it was still done with injections, and that's tricky because then A, somebody has to be in the office, B, it's painful, and then C, with the FDA, there was several problems with both getting the beta glucuronidase because it isn't actually approved for human use in anything, as well as increasing stringent rules around sterile injections. And so Ty Vincent, who did learn with Dr. Schrader with LDI, I love his brilliant, curious mind. He was like, okay, he had some kiddos who weren't going to do injections, and he was like, hey, what if we just do this orally? And the worst case scenario was that it didn't work. But what Ty found was that it was just as effective doing it orally as it was with the injections. And again, he wasn't able to access a beta glucuronidase, and he found that it still was just as effective orally without the enzyme as with, which was fantastic because it really broadens out who then can receive the therapy. You don't have to be in the office. You don't have to be willing to get a shot. I see people all around the country, and I can mail out remedies for them to do at home, which makes it just more available. And then Ty Vincent also started to really expand out the number of different antigens that were available. And instead of only looking at really just allergens, Ty is the one who really started looking at, hey, we're having these global responses to viruses and bacteria or molds. And maybe sometimes the problem isn't the virus itself, but our reaction to it. And so that's where Ty has really blown this out to be the low dose immunotherapy. And now there's maybe even 100 different antigens that Ty has pulled out, or other practitioners doing LDI have created.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about Dr. Vincent is that he really tracks pretty well the responses
Mhm.
with his patients. And, he's super intellectually honest. Like, that's one of the things I love about him is that he'll
Yep.
be like, yeah, we developed this one, we used it. I don't really see it working.
100%. I know. I think maybe I'm somewhat of a more rule follower. I love that he's like, well, let's just try it. What if we just do it orally? I love I love that. I love
So
that about him too.
So now this was a kind of interesting shift because LDI went kind of away from kill the invader to calm the immune response, like you're saying. And for someone, let's say a patient who spent years on like antibiotics or antihistamines with very limited relief, why was that shift so important? What makes the immune reset approach different?
I think it just brings a lot of hope. You know, the saying, if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you always got. Like when you have
Hmm.
somebody who has gone through so many different antibacterial or antifungal treatments again and again and again, and we're not getting a response at some point, it does beg the question, is the actual problem that this wee beastie is in there, or is it our response to it? And there's lots of things where we already know that answer, right? Like if you take the herpes simplex virus, it just lives in us and it doesn't do anything. And we'll stress our system in some sort of a way. And then all of a sudden, the immune system is like, ooh, what are you? And then it fights the herpes simplex virus and you get an outbreak. And then it calms down and then the virus is still there and it waits for it's just kind of hanging out until the immune system decides again, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be here. And so we've got lots of examples like that. Or the chickenpox virus, when it comes back as shingles, it's been in the body for decades sometimes before it just rears up as shingles. But that whole time, it's not like the chickenpox virus was causing a disease state in that interim kind of quiescent stage.
Let me ask you, this is like coming out of left field, but I think it's important. How would you describe the difference between, let's say, getting an immune shot that
Uh,
maybe the pediatrician recommends for children or
Mhm.
adults? How is that different from what you do?
gotcha. So you're talking about like the difference between a vaccine
Yes,
and
vaccines versus the LDI.
Or desensitization that an allergist, like
Right, right.
injecting the pollen
yeah,
directly
yeah,
to the, yeah.
totally. So with the vaccine, on some level, it's like the exact opposite, where what the vaccine is doing is it's showing the immune system, hey, this is a bad guy. You should make antibodies to this so that if you see it again, you can just respond more quickly,
Hmm.
right? Whereas with the low-dose immunotherapy, we're saying, hey, this is something that maybe you don't have to worry about, and we could calm you down. I think Dr. Vincent was really onto something in terms of doing it orally because when we're asking our body to learn about tolerance in the first place, it's actually done through the mouth. So, you know how little kids are all the time putting things in their mouth? This is exactly what we want to have happen because they're learning what's in my environment that I don't need to fight. So with vaccines, it does make a difference that it's injected into the skin because that is a scarier route for it. And then in the vaccine, we're also putting things in there to alarm the immune system to make it ramp up, right? And then your question, Michael, about the desensitization and allergy shots, I think at the end of the day, I think that we're trying to do much the same thing, except for the LDI is lovely because it's under your tongue. You can do it at home. It's very inexpensive. And so I think those are kind of the advantages there.
So here's an interesting question. So finding the right dose is
Yeah.
a very important thing with anything you do. And it sounds kind of like a sort of a detective process that you go through. So can you describe for us like what that dose finding journey looks like in practice and what
Yeah.
happens when someone gets too high or too low a dose?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I oftentimes speak in analogies. So I'm gonna bring this to an analogy because I think it makes it a little bit easier to grok. When we're talking about tolerance, oftentimes make this analogy that LDI is working, we think specifically with T regulatory cells or T regulatory lymphocytes. And I have this analogy where the T regulatory cells, which are usually thought to kind of calm things down, is sort of like this neighborhood watch. And you should know I have this whole backstory for her. She has poor eyesight, she's elderly, she kind of forgets things, and she has a lot of time on her hands. She's very vigilant. And remember, with tolerance, her first job is to know who lives in the neighborhood because she shouldn't be calling on anybody who's just coming home,
Hmm.
right? Anytime she sees something that she's worried about, she picks up the phone and she calls in the emergency services. So the police come and first responders and the ambulances, and there's lights and there's flashing and they're stopping people. And that's essentially like inflammation. And that's usually what's causing us distress or causing us symptoms. So we're wanting to have her call the emergency line less frequently, especially for things that are not a problem, right?
Hmm.
So, in my analogy, she has very poor eyesight. So, what's happening is there's a punk who's coming in and he's friends with her next door neighbor, and he's really just fine. He just looks pretty scary. He's got the hair and the spikes and the things, right? He's not causing any harm, but he makes her feel super worried. So, every time she sees him, she calls. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show her with the LDI a picture of him so that she can say, oh, he's supposed to be here. Different potencies. We're trying to get the picture to be just right in focus for her. So if the picture is too fuzzy, her eyesight can't see it. That's like if the antigen is too dilute or the potency is too high. She can't see it, and so there's no response. And no response looks like you staying within your best and worst days. So the things that always happen to you are still happening to you. So we gave you this dose and you're still staying right in line here. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
When we get the picture dialed in just right, we have the potency just right, then she can see it. And she's like, oh, I see this is that guy, and I'm not supposed to call. And she has a memory that will last for about 6 to 7 weeks. So she'll be like, yep, I saw the picture, and for 6 or 7 weeks, she won't call. You'll be symptom free. It's lovely. Now, if we make the picture too high def, it's like this 3D awesome image, then she's going to get freaked out by the picture and call emergency services on the picture. So
Hmm.
that's what's known as a flare. So that means that all of the symptoms that you're having, they stay the same, but they're dialed in a bit more. So what we do with whatever antigen that we're working with is we start at a very dilute dose, and every week we set up an experiment to say, okay, does this remedy at this potency make your symptoms better? And we watch for a week. It's like back to pure scientific method. Remember, you learned in third grade, like you have a hypothesis, and then you do the experiment, and then you observe and you make a decision. So we give the remedy, a couple drops of water under the tongue. The hypothesis is that this is going to make your symptoms better. And then we wait for that week to see, we observe. Did that work? Did that not work? And at the end of the week, we have the decision of was there a change or was there not a change? Again, no change means your symptoms stayed exactly the same, whatever they were. If there's a change, it could be better or worse. We want to see for how long. So, again, if the remedy is too dilute or we have the wrong one, nothing happens. If we have the right remedy, right dose, symptoms get better. If we have the right remedy and it's too strong or the potency is too low, then you can get a flare where your symptoms get a bit worse. Does that make sense?
That does. So when have looked at some websites that maybe someone who does the same work as you, they'll list a bunch of, here's some conditions that this can be really good for. And there's a lot of chronic stuff on there, a lot of allergies. I'm also seeing a lot of autoimmune type things.
Exactly.
So that's getting a lot more attention in the last decade or so in our culture. But can you, A, speak to autoimmune, what's really happening? And then B, how does the approach differ from, say, if you just went to your general practitioner?
Totally. So, autoimmune, if we go back to our lovely little analogy, that would be if our neighborhood watch is now calling on somebody who lives in the neighborhood. So, what it means is that our bodies have developed an antibody to our own tissue. And so we are attacking our own tissue. That's what auto means self, immune is immune. So we're having an immune reaction to our own tissue. and will often differentiate different autoimmune diseases based on the tissue that's being attacked. So if you've developed an antibody to the thyroid, it'll be called Hashimoto's. Or if you develop an antibody to the myelin sheath, it'll be called MS. That's where that is. In conventional medicine, the answer has just been to turn down the entire immune system, right? So we don't want this attack to be happening, so we'll turn everything down. So a first line of things had always been prednisone. And then if you get further, we've got a lot of different biologics. And if you listen to the commercials at the end of it, you'll hear this whole list of, because if your immune system is doing an important job and we want it to do that, so if we turn it down, that means that you're more vulnerable to either getting a severe infection because your immune system has been turned down, or you're also at greater risk to getting different cancers because another important thing that our immune system is doing all of the time is going through and looking at each of our cells and making sure that they haven't acquired any cancerous changes. So that's why you hear that big laundry list at the end of any of the biologics that they're talking about. So the LDI is lovely because it's really modulating the immune system at that single point, saying, hey, wait a minute, you don't have to attack the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is our friend. So we can leave the rest of the immune system doing its important job and just calm down the response to a particular tissue. So it's a much finer dial.
Yeah, I always get a kick out of those commercials. They always make you feel like so secure. The person's dancing through a field of flowers, all happy and joyful in their white dress or whatever it is. Non-drowsy Allegra. And it goes through all the things. And then at the end, it's like may cause fatigue and drowsiness.
Things that are worse than what you started
Exactly.
with.
You may have excessive bleeding or even death. You're like,
Just to make
Liver disease.
hey.
so, well,
Yeah.
and they have to do that. And this is not to put fear into people around something they absolutely have to do sometimes. Like sometimes the things don't work and they need a strong medication that helps them live quality of life. So I don't want to disparage
100%.
that.
No, 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 not a despair, just a differentiation. And especially with prednisone, we'll use that in an autoimmune flare for sure, because it's lovely as a, gosh, we're in this flare, let's bring this down. And then we can work on all of the things to make sure that it doesn't flare again, that we go into remission.
Yeah, this is actually a great question for the kind of the naturopathic philosophy side of things. Like, speak to us a little bit about level of invasiveness and like
Yeah.
sort of the approach that you take when people come in from that holistic perspective.
So I think for me, like more broadly as a naturopath,
Mhm.
my focus is how do I bring us back into optimal physiology? Not how do I stop this symptom, but how do I bring you into a balanced state of physiology so the symptom just doesn't happen. And I am on a daily basis amazed at the ability that our bodies have to heal. And when we remove obstacles to cure and when we give the help that's required, our bodies are so willing and happy to come back and bring us that vibrancy and joy. And it's one of the things that I love about the low dose immunotherapy is that I think I said before that my dad is like the skeptic that I'm always talking to, right? And I was talking to him about this, especially as a new therapy and the changes that I was seeing in patients. And he's like, well, if it's so great, why doesn't everybody do it? And
That's a common thing people say. Yeah.
right.
Hey, if it
And
worked, it would be called medicine, not
right.
naturopath.
And the real downside of LDI is that it costs time and attention. So it's not just knowing which antigen and for a given thing, especially if it's like a complex situation, it might be one of three or it might be two of five. You know, it's not always just one remedy. So it takes time to go each week and being willing to observe and make a decision and look at yourself and keep track of what you're doing. It takes a hot minute. It's not as easy as like, let me just scribble something on a paper and you just fill it and then we're done. And
Hmm.
so it's that amount of time to figure out the right remedy is oftentimes the obstacle for LDI.
Yeah, and it seems like time is the big variable there. People are like, just give me something so I can go back to work tomorrow and not be off all week while we're trying something. And so that impatience maybe. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's say that a patient calls you up and wants to come in and work on their rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us how you would approach that in general, but also how would you round out the treatment so it's not just this, but you might be looking at some other things like diet and things of that
Yeah.
nature. Yeah. So how would you tackle that?
Absolutely. So I love rheumatoid arthritis is really lovely in the LDI realm because there's only like 1 to 3 different antigens that it could be. And with things like rheumatoid or even osteoarthritis, because you're like immediately you know how your joints feel, it's very easy to track. So I'm like, arthritis is one of the easiest ones to work with, even rheumatoid, which is autoimmune. And then, the LDI is addressing the immune component of things, but there's oftentimes this whole other realm of things that we're going to want to look at as well. Are there toxic loads of sorts? Are there nutrient deficiencies of sorts? Herbs. We've been using herbs for thousands of years. They've been our allies for thousands of years, and there's so many beautiful things that they bring to us. So I'm going to put folks on the herbs that I've been using. Like I said, LDI is a newer therapy for me. I've just been doing it a few years. I'm still pulling on the things that I was doing before that even if we're looking within the immune system, that might be balancing the cytokines more, or looking at curcumin and resveratrol and fish oils and all of that stuff are still so helpful to bringing us back into balance. We're so complex, and usually what's happening to us is more complex than a single thing or a single therapy or a single antigen is going to address.
Do you have a
And
story, like a success story, where you've used this therapy with someone and had this remarkable change?
oh, yeah, yeah. So I'll actually stay in the realm of rheumatoid arthritis, one of my
Okay.
favorite patients. She actually had a few different autoimmune conditions. She had
Yeah.
rheumatoid arthritis, she had giant cell arteritis, she'd also been flux. So there's a whole lot of things that we had done for her. And she had had rheumatoid arthritis since she was in her teens. So she's come in, she's in her mid 60s, and she's on prednisone and she's on a biologic, and she still has
Yeah.
significant joint pain. She's still having muscle weakness, and her labs are still crazy off the charts. And we started doing the LDI. And now, to be fair, she's on 4 different remedies. It kind of pulled everything together, but she's off the prednisone, she's off her biologic, she has zero joint pain. And the thing that I love the most is that her labs have normalized.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and all of them have come down into normal range. Now, with rheumatoid arthritis, you oftentimes have structural changes within the hand. Did those reverse? They didn't. But does she have increased strength and flexibility in her fingers?
Right.
She does. And she started playing the piano again, which is
Wow.
just
Cool.
like makes my heart so happy.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that one.
Yeah.
I've got lots of
Oh,
them.
let's hear another one. I want to
Yeah.
hear
Tell
another.
us
Yeah.
another one.
Tell us another one.
The
Yeah.
Those are
stories.
great.
Right? I have this other little guy. He's the cutest thing in the world. He just comes in. He's just very, very earnest and very just the sweetest thing. And he's been having ear infections
Mm,
like his whole life. He's had multiple of the tubes put
mm,
in. It often goes down into bronchitis and pneumonias, and he's been missing school. And, for old school naturopathic, it's always like, ear infections are almost always food intolerances, right? And so, what I would have done in the past is I would have put him on a relatively restrictive diet. We definitely would have pulled out gluten, we would have pulled out dairy, we would have pulled out corn, we might have pulled out egg. And even in the past, predictably, his ear infections would have gotten better. But we did LDI instead, and this was a year and a half ago. We found his remedy, and he hasn't had an ear infection since. Like none. He missed zero school all of last year, which is like unheard of for this kid. And I love it because instead of pulling out all these foods where he would have had to like go to a birthday party and not eaten the cake, like he wasn't restricted in any of those ways, which is really lovely.
So I'm going to bring this up because I think that it fits with what we do on this podcast. And because we look at things from a physiological standpoint,
Yeah.
from a structural standpoint, but we also like to talk about the energetic and the more esoteric
Yeah,
aspects of
Right.
our life.
I hear
And
you.
you do, I think you have some really kind of cool devices that you use. Like one of the things that I've heard about is the Beamer device.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
do
yeah.
you use those in conjunction with the LDI? Like talk a little bit about what that does.
Yeah, totally. The Beamer machine is really cool. It's a pulsed electromagnetic frequency or PMF device. And it's the one that was developed by NASA for astronauts because it turns out that a lot of our circulation is dependent on gravity pulling
Yeah.
things down.
Right.
Mm,
So astronauts were like, there's all sorts of very specific problems that they have when they're spending a lot of time in zero gravity or and one of them was circulation. And so what the beamer does is this pulsed electromagnetic frequency that actually pulses the smallest of our blood vessels, which is really cool. So our circulatory system is very much like I think of it, it's very much like streets where you've got the big arteries or like the big highways, and then you go into like, some major streets like 99, and then you get into smaller and smaller streets until you get the little tiny streets where cars are pulling into their driveway and they're bringing in the groceries and they're taking out the trash. And that's the level of blood vessel that the PMF is working on to really get those little surface streets open and optimal. The bloodstream is what's going to carry all the nutrients that you've eaten, and it's also going to take away all the remnants of cellular inflammation and cellular trash and take that away. So, anyway, that you can increase circulation is going to improve anything that you're working with because the household's going to work better if the trash is taken out and we've got a full pantry.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that
Yeah.
is a great modality, and people should
Mhm.
certainly look that up, Beamer. If you were gonna, look forward, or if you think about what's cutting edge right now in your field, like what are some things that are, excite you that's coming down the pike? What should we be looking for, listening for?
What I love about this job is that there's always new things to learn. And
mm,
we're growing in our understanding in so many different ways. And sometimes it's growing our understanding in, why does this herb that's been used for such a long time, like I was just listening to a podcast on microglial cells and how andrographis helps the microglial cells shift from the M1 fight it phase to the M2 fix it phase. Like, I love that we're getting more and more like able to look and understand of why the things that we've always done work. That's one of my favorite things. And understanding of what's happening in the immune system now compared to when I graduated medical school, which is 20 years, but there's whole systems
Right.
that we didn't even talk about in medical school. And I love that every day we're understanding things a little bit more, and that one day you could just say, like, oh, hey, this LDI thing, what is this?
mm.
And dive into that.
So, Pamela, we really, really appreciate having you on our podcast today. And
Okay.
one of the questions we always like to end with is what would be one thing, or even a few things, that you would like to leave our listeners with, that concept that you want to share to close out for today?
Yeah. In all of the fancy things, that it oftentimes comes back to the simple things, making sure that you get enough sleep. And when you're feeling sleepy in the evening, even if it's 9 o'clock, that you actually let yourself rest. Making sure that you're feeding yourself whole, nutritious foods, and making sure that you're feeding your soul with friends and family and things that make you feel grateful and joyful, and taking a moment to stop to notice the things that are really wonderful in this life, because it's really easy to get caught up in what's problematic. I remember during COVID, there was one day, I was listening to all the news and trying to figure out all the things. And my son and I went out for a walk, and I was like, I need to remember the sky is still blue and the dogwoods are blooming right now and they're gorgeous.
Yeah, focus on the simple things that work instead of always looking and staring at the problem.
Totally.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been very
Mhm.
interesting and exciting, and we appreciate and wish you well.
Thank you, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.